Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the Eastern Border. Now, I feel really happy that you liked the previous episode about Kalashnikov and the whole history of it. And, well, I'm happy that it turned out well because normally on these episodes, well, oh boy, a lot of things can go wrong, and I'm glad that nothing really happened. But today, we're back with the news. First of all, I'd like to start with our good old buddy Igor Girkin, also known as Strelkov, but we don't really call him that way. Today was his appeals court hearing. And, well, the first instance of this appeals court basically did exactly as we all had expected here and left his sentence without any changes, which means that he remains under the arrest and he's still called an extremist. And, well, we don't exactly know if he's going to be even allowed to go and serve in the Ukraine and do shenanigans there. However, everyone on the Z public are very much disappointed, but this was to be expected. I highly doubt that they're going to do anything important about all this mess or anything of that sort. It seems just likely that he's going to remain in prison until his final sentencing plops out, and then some. Well, at least it's going to be easy to find him when all this system in Russia just breaks down. But on a more serious note, we have to focus on France once again. French President Macron said that Ukraine must be given the opportunity to neutralize military bases from which Russian missiles are launched into its territory. We must allow them, that means Ukraine, to neutralize the military bases from which missiles are launched. This is what he said in the joint news conference with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. At the same time, the territory of Ukraine, according to Macron, is attacked from bases located in Russia. This whole not allowing thing is helping Russia immensely because they've gotten wise to this and now they launch attacks from their own territory where Ukraine is not allowed to hit back. Because, well, they can't use American long-range weapons to strike targets deep in Russia, one of the conditions of the transfer, and a bunch of others as well. European leaders currently are divided on whether or not to allow Ukraine to use Western weapons to strike targets there. German Chancellor said that he does not yet see any reason to lift the ban. Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani also opposed the lifting of the ban, but at the same time, Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski noted that Russia does not limit itself to anything and called on Western countries to also stop limiting themselves in supporting Ukraine. Lifting of the restrictions was also supported by, our President Edgar Sienkiewicz, Jens Stoltenberg, NATO General Secretary, Dutch Defense Minister Kajsa Ollongren, I hope I pronounced that right, and Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala. In this whole thing, Russia does not really limit itself to anything, and they're making some interesting moves. Macron, by the way, is the first one to send actual troops to Ukraine as instructors. The deal has been signed with Zelensky very recently, and it seems like Macron is trying to put his money where his mouth is. After all, he's been the one talking about how there should be no red lines and everything should be put on the table. This sending instructors for starters and all these long-range strikes, I believe it's going to be allowed at any time anyways in the future, because for one, at the beginning of the war, no one could think that Ukraine would even get tanks or airplanes or anything, but now Macron is sending in his instructors and saying that Ukraine should be allowed to strike targets inside Russia. So it's just moving, and slowly. As I always say, this whole mess could have just gotten over with. It could have ended if only the whole time everything that Ukraine needed would have been delivered straight up, just straight up. Poland is also an interesting thing because besides allowing Ukraine to strike targets deep within Russia, Poland is finishing up its own Eastern Shield program, which has made them, like I've mentioned in the episode where I spoke with Heaton about this, even closer, made them be very close with South Korea. Again, South Korea is very close to getting nuclear weapons. Basically, they could build them as soon as they wanted to. And Poland is now buying their weaponry, as South Korea has a very large military industry at this point, and they've turned themselves into an exporter. And Poland, that wants to help Ukraine and wants to also defend itself, is the number one purchaser of everything the South Korean government makes. And there is quite significant significant rumors around, and there is a belief that if South Korea would decide to go nuclear, then Poland would also receive some of those nukes as a deterrence measurement. And what speaks for it is that they're also ready to place American nuclear missiles on their soil, which should in that case make them a target of any Russian nuclear strike. But it still, is a significant development. We should watch Poland closely lately, and especially knowing their friendly ties with France at the moment. Meanwhile, searches were carried out in Brussels and Strasbourg, including in the offices of the European Parliament, in connection with an investigation into possible Russian interference in the activities of this EU body. Politico reports this with reference to a statement from the Belgian federal prosecutor. The investigation believes that some members of the European Parliament received money for, quote, promoting Russian propaganda through the Voice of Europe website. There are indications that a member of the European Parliament played a significant role in this. This is what said the Belgian law enforcement authorities. According to Le Figaro sources, we're talking about Guillaume Prador, who was previously an assistant to the MEP Maximilian Krah from the far-right AfD party, Alternative for Deutschland. Prador currently holds the position of assistant to the Dutch MP Marcel de Graaf. This is closely tied to when, on the May 27th, the European Union imposed sanctions against the news publication Voice of Europe. Ukrainian politician Viktor Medvedchuk and his close associate Artyom Marchevsky were also subject to restrictions. EU authorities believe that Medvedchuk, Marchevsky, and Voice of Europe are responsible for spreading propaganda within the EU and neighboring countries aimed at justifying the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In addition, they consistently targeted European political parties. According to EU, Voice of Europe participated in an international campaign aimed at destabilizing the situation in Ukraine, the EU, and its member states, and was also used as a tool to finance the activities of propagandists. As Deutsche Welle notes, Voice of Europe website published, among other things, interviews with Maximilian Krah and his colleague in the Alternative for Deutschland, Alternative for Germany party. So these guys have been proven to be even too radical for the far-right section of the Euro Parliament, and they have been promptly kicked out just before any election stuff. Meanwhile, if you remember my economical episodes when I spoke about how Russia's gasoline production is going low and everything, well, their troubles seem to continue because the Ministry of Energy closed data on gasoline production in Russia. The press service of the Russian Ministry of Energy told journalists that they will stop publishing statistical data on all this production because this decision was made, and I quote, in order to ensure information security of the petroleum products market. Given the current geopolitical situation, the disclosure of such information may become a reason for market manipulation by unscrupulous participants. They also noted that closing the statistics, quote, will help strengthen the reliability of supply to domestic consumers and increase the energy security of the country as a whole, end quote. At the same time, the publication of data on prices for petroleum products will continue. On the evening of May 29th, Rosstat, their statistics agency, published a weekly report on the volume of production of petroleum products and consumer prices for them for the week from May 20th to 26th, but without data on the production of motor gasoline and diesel fuel. Note a magazine called Important Stories. The publication, citing previous Rosstat data, writes that over the past 3 weeks, amid attacks by the armed forces of Ukraine on the Russian oil refineries, the production of motor gasoline has been declining. From May 13th to 19th, it decreased by 2.5% compared to the previous week, from May 6th to 12th by 2.7%, from April 29th to May 5th by 4.4%. This is going to continue on, and again, the troubles are out there and continue. Meanwhile, in response to all of these troubles, we have some, crazy stuff that actually just happens. A propagandist and political scientist from the Higher School of Economics in Russia has now called on the Kremlin to carry out a demonstration nuclear explosion, which should be the first step of them doing something. Dmitry Suslov, published in the Profile magazine, wrote that, quote, the Russian authorities need to sharply strengthen their policy of deterrence and conduct a demonstration nuclear explosion in order to stop further involvement of the West in the war in Ukraine. This Dmitry Suslov, he's been working in the Higher School of Economics since 2006. He's a senior lecturer at the Faculty of World Economy and World Politics. He holds the position of Deputy Director of the Center for Comprehensive European and International Studies at the Higher School of Economics. The whole thing is headed by the political scientist Sergei Karaganov, who previously called on the Kremlin to launch a preventive nuclear strike on, well, Poland, who's now finishing their own defense program. Suslov is listed as a deputy director of the expert non-governmental council of foreign and defense policy. He also, by the way, works as one of the hosts of the propaganda talk show Big Game on the big Channel 1. He wrote his article titled, "It's Time to Think About the Demonstration Nuclear Explosion." He says there that the situation in Ukraine is leading to the point that the United States and its allies may soon allow Kyiv to attack Russia with Western weapons, in response to, well, all that you've heard previously tonight. Such a decision, as he notes, will take the conflict to a new level and will mean the direct entry of the United States and NATO into the war against Russia. That's what he believes. According to him, Moscow must warn Western countries that it reserves the right to strike at any of their facilities in the event of a non-nuclear strike by Washington or NATO on Russian territory. It must use nuclear weapons for this. Quote, "To confirm the seriousness of Russia's intentions and convince our opponents of Moscow's readiness to escalate, it is worth considering conducting the demonstration, that is, not a combat, nuclear explosion. The political and psychological effect of the nuclear mushroom, which will be shown live on all television channels in the world, I hope, will return to Western politicians the only thing that prevented wars between the great powers after 1945, and that they have mostly lost, the fear of nuclear war." That's what he says in conclusion. Previously, in June 2023, Sergei Karaganov, with whom Dmitry Suslov works at the Higher School of Economics and the Council of Foreign and Defense Policy, published an article in the Profile magazine entitled "A Difficult but Necessary Decision." Among other things, it said that in order to win in Ukraine, Russia must launch a preemptive nuclear strike on Europe in order to break the will of the West. According to Karaganov, this would not have led to a global nuclear war, since the United States would not have stood up for its allies. Soon, other members issued a statement opposing a preemptive nuclear strike. The thing is, none of this is going to happen. Like, Putin is not as stupid as it may seem. He will definitely not do this. If something like this happens, well, then the world's going to be a different place. But if you remember, in the same day that Prigozhin launched his own weird thing, there was a severe message by the United States towards Russia. If any nuclear weapons would be used, then there would be a bunch of issues. I believe this is just a saber rattling in response to Ukraine just, receiving more aid and getting these permissions. Again, what's the most important part is not to back down, because I believe that Putin really cares about all of his reputation and all of his buddies, villas and everything. I doubt this is going to happen, but well, yet again, we're going to have to see how the Western leaders react to all this situation. At the same time, before we're going to go on our last news segment, I'd like to remind you that you can support the show on Patreon by going to patreon.com/theeasternborder, or you can go to theeasternborder.lv and click the donate button there, which would be much appreciated. And, if you go to the home site, we have a link up there to our merch store where you can buy t-shirts and caps and everything, because we have a fourth wall thing now where you can also become a member, and we'll give you perks. We'll give you perks at some point, and I'll figure out stuff to give Patreons as well, because we have to sort this one out. I'm not good at monetizing. For Latvian listeners, I have also decided to start a tiny little YouTube channel in Latvian where I'm going to explain actual stoicism to our Latvian audiences, because I feel like this is getting traction these days. A lot of young people, young men are very lost in their place in the world, and they're looking at some pseudo-scientific inspiration which talks about stoicism as some sort of easy thing to grasp by oftentimes twisting the actual meaning of these things. So I'll be doing this in Latvian, because I believe that, our audience needs something like this. Hopefully I'll succeed with that. I'm also in the process of editing my whole foreign policy article. It's going to be about the whole apathy, the culture of political apathy in Russia, and of course I will let you know when that airs. Also, I'd like to thank all of the YouTube subscribers. Turns out we have quite a few of them right now, which surprises me, because I don't really, all this stuff gets automatically posted to YouTube and I don't really follow it that much, but I think I'll be making some specifically YouTube videos, some of my drone stuff, and if I'll go out and film any actual, materials, visual stuff, those are going to go on the YouTube channel, which is just the Eastern Border, and so that there's like more benefits for you to actually go and maybe watch it at some point. But my first and foremost thing is always going to be this podcast, after all. I just have to, figure out a lot of stuff, and making these news takes a lot of time and effort if I want to do them right. I've also reached out to a bunch of people. Hopefully we'll have some interviews. I want to get Simon Whistler on the show with all of his war graphics and all other channels. I believe I could do some writing for him. So if you've listened to and watch any of his channels, please send him an email. I've sent some. He just hasn't really responded because obviously he's a busy man and I can't respond to all the emails as well. But if you drop a comment on any of his channels, if you watch them, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's war graphics, Into the Shadows, all that thing. If you could poke him, that'd be really nice. But I wanted to leave this final news stuff for last because it's one of those meanwhile in Russian news from the regions. See, in Voronezh being the city out of all the memes where Bambich Voronezh arrived, well, they have outdone themselves this time. See, on May 28th, at school number 62 on Berezovaya Roshcha Street, before taking the unified state exam on Russian language, schoolgirls were forced to take off their underwear during a search. It's reported by Voronezh1.ru, a local news site. As one of the students told reporters, metal detectors at the entrance began to detect metal parts in their bras, which is why security demanded that the schoolgirls take off their underwear. Quote, 3 girls came into my classroom without bras. 1 girl was not allowed in wearing a corset. Others were asked to remove the whole, bras and everything, and braces and anything metallic. The girl with braces was admitted only an hour later, the publication's contact said. The bras were not taken off in the toilet. There was an entrance to the school, and there was a frame there. Those who squeaked, they were taken out. They were checked on the street. Then they passed by and squeaked again. And they were told, take off your bra. This is like the metal detector beeping there, squeaking. And we have a quote here from the person involved in this. Take off your bra, people, I was told. And show that you've taken your bra off. For some people, they just checked their shorts. Some were checked in the corridor, some went outside. The father of one of my classmates counted 11 girls on the street alone who went out to take off their bras. According to this source, some schoolgirls were hysterical and crying because they were forced to take off their clothing. In Voronezh public pages, and that's in Telegram, local residents asked the authorities why such a situation was allowed to happen. The requests were obviously not answered. According to media reports, the regional Ministry of Education did not receive any complaints about violations of order during the examinations. The State Duma has already promised to look into what has happened. Nothing much is going to change, but the situation is just outrageous. Chairman of the Education Committee, Olga Kazakova, said that deputies and Rosobernadzor, the Russian Education Board, will conduct an inspection and punish the perpetrators. The head of the Family Protection Committee, Nina Ostanin, said that she would raise this topic at a plenary meeting of the State Duma. According to State Duma deputy from the Voronezh region, Yevgeny Revenko, the prosecutor's office is also conducting an investigation into the incident at the Voronezh school. So, of course, people have denied this, and although we have direct videos of this whole situation and people being told to remove their bras and everything, the head of the exam reception point at the school, in response, stated that during the inspection of these school kids, no one ever asked graduates to either take off their bras or take them up or lift them, and nor did they ask to do anything of all these kids. One of the station's employees added that the graduates, quote, in a couple of cases out of emotion, raised their outerwear. Rosobernadzor looked into it, and these are the facts that we talked about. They do not correspond to reality. Everything was done there in accordance with the regulations. This is what the head of the Ministry of Education of the Russian Federation, Sergei Kravtsov, said. And again, despite the fact that we have this stuff filmed all over, and kids were filming this, they just outright denied. They just outright lie, because this is of the same scale as, the whole situation with the broken dam. Because I don't know, a lot of people state that Russia is defending its traditional values and everything, but it's not. such things happen at all times because this is what you get when corruption has taken over and doing things for the checkbox takes over literally whatever else is happening. We'll see how the front line develops and everything, but yeah, the criminalization where people just do it for the bureaucracy and just force schoolgirls to take this off and nothing's going to happen because they deny everything and everything's going to go hush-hush. Yeah, I highly doubt that this is going to raise any faith in Putin's government, but we'll hear more and more about such things as they go on. We still have many stories about returning soldiers who are committing crimes and everything. But this is a cursed decade and it's just going to get worse. But, as usual, you can just follow and hope that the situation improves for the better. До свидания, товарищи. And remember, happiness is mandatory.